Three, two, one, action. Hey everyone, my name is Blake Lewis, and let's just jump right into this video dissection with two very huge shows, The Office and Parks and Rec. Both amazing and beautifully well written, and both completely different in their own special way. Before we jump into it, I'd like to apologize for the lighting. I'm kind of working in my garage right now, so let's start off with comparing their two completely different types of comedy. The Office specialized in cringy, uncomfortable humor, making the audience so uncomfortable with secondhand embarrassment they can't help but laugh. Whether it be Michael having to tell a classroom full of students that he will not be paying for their college, or Andy humiliating himself in front of Robert California or Nellie. The Office focused on how uncomfortable things can get in the workplace, and multiplied that by infinity, plus one. Almost everyone I've ever spoken to who enjoys The Office always follows it by saying, uncomfortable and cringy is just my humor. Which I get. I mean, not really. There were episodes where I physically had to fast forward through it, it was so rough. Parks and Rec handles their humor in a completely different way. Parks and Rec puts all their weight on their wacky, zany characters who just said, did, or reacted to funny things. I know the two sound familiar, but they couldn't be more different. Parks and Rec likes their dialogue and has way more quips. The jokes are a little more straightforward and more of what you would call classic. For example, Little Sebastian getting lost at the Harvest Festival and all the Parks and Rec gang having to come together and look for him, all while dealing with their own sideline conflicts. Andy not saying I love you back to April, Tom trying to pin Little Sebastian on Jerry, etc., etc. Another example that comes to mind, oddly enough, involving Little Sebastian. In that same episode, we see Ben Wyatt's reaction to Little Sebastian. This interaction is one of the best written and ongoing jokes of the entire series. While the entire city of Pawnee, including the Parks and Rec gang, go crazy for this tiny horse, Ben Wyatt seems to be the only one not able to wrap his head around what is so special about this horse. This mini horse with an honorary degree from Notre Dame. What also sets these two shows apart is how they set up their plots and storylines. The Office had a way more intricate and at times dramatic storyline throughout the entire series. The will they won't they of Jim and Pam was what personally got me hooked. I remember seeing this scene and thinking, I guess I understand why people go crazy for this show.
Listen, Jim.
Oftentimes I felt like The Office planned their significant moments and character arcs from the very beginning. Pam trying to get Jim to admit he thinks Kathy is attractive, almost half a season before she tries to seduce him. That's how you play the long haul. And the even longer haul is that was the beginning of Jim and Pam's riff that would happen on later on in the season. That's planning ahead. It's a known fact that television shows do infinitely better and are way more engaging with some sort of overarching dramatic plotline. If I'm being entirely honest, I almost lost all interest in The Office after Jim and Pam got together, and everything looked fine. Angela was with the senator, and Dwight and Angela had supposedly stopped seeing each other. It was just boring, but then things took a left turn and got really spicy. The Jim, Pam, Kathy arc, the Andy and Aaron story, the Andy and Nellie battle, with Daryl and Val on the side, and before you know it, it's the last season and you don't know if Jim and Pam are even going to make it. If a show doesn't have a crazy intricate and dramatic storyline encompassing a season or two, that doesn't necessarily mean it's automatic garbage. It just needs something else. let's look at Parks and Rec. They may have had a few good arcs, such as the will they won't they of Ben and Leslie, the April and Andy drama in season 2 or 3, and the Leslie running for the office saga. But none of those are too intricate. Parks and Rec writers seem to, for lack of a better phrase, wing it. They of course had their idea of what they wanted to do for the season, but they were way less concerned about foreshadowing and planning several episodes ahead like The Office did. But this doesn't necessarily make it a bad show. Parks and Rec remains a classic because they knew what they did have. Parks and Rec always was a feel-good show. No matter what happened, in an episode of Parks and Rec, it always ended positively. It always had the good guys win by simply being good and pure of heart. Whether it be Leslie beating her nemesis Jam by working harder, outthinking him, or Leslie saving everyone's job by bringing back the Harvest Fest and doing it monumentally amazingly through the hard work and the entire Parks and Rec gang, no matter what happened, the good guys won. Either through hard work or grit, or just because they had good hearts. And everyone on the Parks and Rec gang were undeniably good people. The only 100% negative thing that happened to the crew was possibly Leslie being removed from the office, or Andy not being able to be a rock star. But those things are compensated. By the end, we see that Leslie gets into better offices and has better jobs in the future, and we see that Andy has his own television show. He feels fulfilled. No one really lost in Parks and Rec. It showed the happy, wholesome, and oftentimes heroic light side of the workplace. And on the flip side, we have The Office. It was a show that not everything worked out. Characters on The Office lost sometimes, they lost their jobs, they failed art school, and sometimes they killed their girlfriend's cat while they were having an affair. What also sets these two shows apart from each other is nothing truly permanent happens in Parks and Rec, for the most part. The majority of the show, no one really left or joined the team. Ben and Chris joined a little later, but stayed for the long haul. Chris and Ann left for a while, but returned for the finale. And of course, the character that every single person forgets, Mark Brendanawicz, who was literally never spoken about again. Like almost all sitcoms, Parks and Rec remained the same for the entirety of their run. Same conflicts, same solutions, with the same people doing it in the same format. With exception, of course, to the final season that mixed up everything. But a lot of television shows switch things up between two seasons. The Office made changes as changes happened. People would leave in the middle of the season, come back later on. Things really happened in The Office. People got hired and fired, new people came and went. We saw this a lot with the new managers, and things kind of hitting the fan when Michael left. Characters would leave The Office while still being in the documentary, such as Michael, Pam, and Ryan making their own business.
It's Brittany, bitch.
Or Jim at Stanford meeting Andy and Karen. And finally, what I find the most interesting is their similar style and how they look. The Office was one of the first of the modern sitcoms to adopt the documentary style format. They made it very clear in the beginning that they were doing this for a company that was making a documentary about a boring old paper company. All the characters would do their own talking heads, and sometimes, not singling anyone out, Jim, would look at the camera when things were not going so great.
What? No.
You're
Or I just leave piles.
However, that leaves me a little confused about Parks and Rec's format. Not once did they acknowledge that they were being recorded, but yet they still had their own talking heads and addressed the camera. It makes sense due to the extreme convenience. You never have to wonder what a character's true intentions are because they can just say it to the camera. Sitcoms like Modern Family also do this. In the beginning they explained they were being documented, but we never got to the final product like we do in The Office. Personally, I think they just forgot. The Office took this very seriously. We see them get mic'd up and have the camera person shake their head, and sometimes, one time in particular during the fire safety cold open, falling down and being trampled on. The Office went so far as to go meta with it and give a little story arc with one of the boom mic operators, Brian, who had been secretly in love with Pam and even knocked out one of the warehouse guys for her. Also, side note, anyone else find it crazy that out of 9 seasons, 12 years, the only time we see someone step behind the camera was for that one scene? Even when Dwight and Angela literally hired someone to break Oscar's kneecap? Or when Roy attacked Jim? Or during fire safety when Stanley had a heart attack? Not the best TV crew, if you ask me.
Stanley, you will not die! Stanley! Barack is president! You are black, Stanley! I'm gonna give him mouth to mouth.
No.
These two shows compared to each other, completely different in their own way. It doesn't matter which one you like more or which one you prefer, both are hilarious and well written in their own respective ways. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is one of my first video diaries I've ever made. I'm very excited to keep doing more. If you like it, look at my channel or look at all my social media. Thank you guys so much.
Well, it's time for us to go.
It was